We're going to call this presentation Disclosure Advances. We have done a number of disclosure videos on the Kaph Ministries channel, and this is another one that's based on information that just came out this week. I believe it was December the 8th or something of that order. I was picked up by the media outlets throughout the globe, and obviously picked up by U.S. sources as well. So what we've said in the past is we've said, we've got disclosure, so on and so forth. This is an advance in disclosure, and we're going to focus on something that happened this week that was released in Israel, and primarily through Israeli media sources, from a man named Haim Eshed, and he mentioned something called the Galactic Federation, which, if you've been watching these things from before, this will be something that will be familiar to you. We want to remind you that the things that we're doing are on behalf of a ministry called Kaph Ministries. When you see the icon off to the right here, that's in the lower right corner of the slides, that's the Kaph Ministries logo. It's based around the Hebrew consonant Kaph. And I am a Bible interpreter for Kaph Ministries. I'm the author of the book, The Revelation the Way It Is, which is a commentary on the interpretation of the book of Revelation. I've been doing this for a number of years. I teach Old and New Testament classes, but my primary background in terms of science has been in engineering. I got my engineering degree at the PhD in engineering from the Imperial College, which at the time I was there was the #1 engineering school in Europe, would be the equivalent of, say, MIT or Caltech or Stanford here in the United States. So while my focus is on interpretation of the Bible, by extension, the things that are going on in the world is literally us going into a new age. And so we've included that as part of the things that Kaph Ministries do. If you want to contact us, we're on Facebook. You can email us at kaphministries@protonmail.com. And of course, we have a post office box, which is listed here. We're going to be putting this on YouTube, so if you wish to go to our channel, which is under Kaph Ministries, you can do so and pick up additional information from there. Okay, so let's get into the presentation now. This is Dr. Haim Eshed. He is reported to be 87 years old. This is from the Smithsonian Institute website. It's important to mention that they don't certify and validate anything that's there. I think that Dr. Eshed or people who back him are supporters of the Smithsonian. So none of these things are verified or validated according to Smithsonian, but it says he's a professor of aeronautics and astronautics. He's a pilot and flight instructor. He's a member of the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics. And this is the one that I want you to focus on. He's the co-founder of the Israel Space Agency. He was instrumental in launching Israeli satellites, and he was one of the co-founders of the Space Agency for Israel. And they did that in association with Technion, which is one of the leading technological institutes in the world. So this is not a, let's put it this way, this is, from the Israeli perspective, probably one of the most credible people in space agency in Israel, and he would be one of the leading guys in the world in this particular area. This is from Linda Moulton Howe. She's been, from her site called Earth Files. She's been doing this work for quite a long time. She gives some additional information. The interview that was originally done was in a magazine called Yediot Aharonoth, which is where the original interview was given of the information you're going to see today, but we're going to see it from the perspective of the Jerusalem Post, which is once again a very credible news outlet in Israel. It says that he served from 1981 to 2010 as the head of Israel's security space program. Obviously, for the Israelis, because they have so many enemies, satellite technology is by defect or by just automatically is going to be associated with their security, and obviously the satellites are doing that for them. It says that he received 3 awards called the Israel Security Award, and twice were for confidential technological inventions that he made. So he's obviously an inventive person. He got his bachelor's degree in electronics engineering at Technion. That would probably be our electrical engineering. He's got an MS, and then he did his PhD in aeronautical engineering, and I understand that he did that in the United States. He served in the Technological Institute of the Israeli Defense Force Intelligence Division, and in 1969 he was sent by the IDF to study his PhD in aeronautical engineering in the U.S., which obviously he did, and he's been a leading person in the Israeli military and technology apparatus for a while. He reached the rank, as I understand it, of general. So it says lieutenant colonel, but I understand he's a general. And he is currently serving as a professor at the university, and he's about to write a book, and this is what this is about. Now, when he made the announcements that he made, most of the media reactions to it were, I guess the only way I could describe it, this is just my estimation, is they were goofy. It wasn't all of them, but most of them were focused on the idea where they interpreted what he was saying, that the focus of what he was saying is that aliens were hiding among mankind, which for anyone that's done any extensive research or understanding of this material is kind of silly, because probably virtually everyone comes from off-world, and so hiding among whom and who's the one hiding and who's not, it's all rather silly. But this, of course, is how some of these news media outlets are trying to get people's attention. The thing that is mentioned is he uses a term, and we're going to talk about this, and it's probably the most important thing about our presentation today. He mentions that the communication between the United States and Israel is with an entity called Galactic Federation. So let's repeat that again. He makes the claim that the interaction with the Earth humans from the United States, Earth humans from Israel, is with an entity called the Galactic Federation. And that's what we're going to talk about. NBC News coverage of this was actually not all that bad. They make the statement that he's a respected professor and retired general. And he talks about this idea that the aliens are curious about us and are seeking to understand the fabric of the universe, which is a good description. And they mentioned that Eshed is the one who oversaw the launch of Israeli satellites. And so he's obviously got a very deep connection to the space agency in Israel. The one we're going to focus on is going to be from the Jerusalem Post, and this is a capture from the article that they had on this, which is entitled "Former Israeli Space Security Chief Says Aliens Exist and Humanity Not Ready." This Galactic Federation, which he talks about, was supposedly been in contact with Israel and the U.S. for years, but are keeping themselves a secret to prevent hysteria until humanity is ready. Okay, so these are extracts from this actual article, and the original interview was done in this other magazine, as we had said before. For the Israelis, they're all going to be familiar with who this guy is, and they know that he is a credible person. So they're going to treat him seriously, even though we as Americans perhaps have never heard of this guy. I've never heard of him, but obviously people in Israel will have heard of him and his accomplishments. So he explains that Israel and the US have been dealing with aliens for years. That in itself is not, shall we say, very surprising. But of course, to have someone come out and say this is important. So I want to emphasize that the focus of our discussions on these particular issues is not for us to say that, we're revealing something that's really cool, new, and interesting, because the ufology community has been covering this for a long time. They've uncovered all kinds of interesting information, but these are official channels of credible people who are coming out and essentially validating what a lot of people have suspected for a long period of time. And the idea is for us to think about what this means for the direction of humanity, what this means for the future of our country, the United States of America, and also what this means for your life and how the life of you, the life of your children and or grandchildren, if you have them, how it's all going to change in a very short period of time. Now, we've been doing these presentations on this disclosure since just July, August of this year. So we went into September, October. Here it is December. Today's December the 13th of 2020, and this stuff keeps coming out. So it's important for us to stay on top of this and realize that this disclosure is inevitable. It's inevitable that this is going to occur, and this is just another milestone on the road. He makes the statement, which I think is very interesting, is that if he had said this 5 years ago, he would have been put in some form of type of institution. But he said today things are different because the world is different. And also he's at a point, he's 87 years old. He's gotten all of his awards. He's a recognized authority. He doesn't have any axes to grind. He's not worried about what people are going to think about him. And it's also coincidental, he's writing a book called The Universe Beyond the Horizon. And this book obviously is part of this promotion. Some people think that he's doing this to promote his book. Yeah, of course, that's kind of obvious. But as someone who's a little on the older side myself, what's important for someone his age is his legacy. And the other thing, too, is he's part of the military intelligence apparatus. These guys never do things accidentally, ever. They just don't. He's not going to come out and say this unless he had approvals at very high level, and it's not about him promoting his book. I'm sure at 87, he's not so worried about that. I think it's probably more like this is part of a coordinated program of some sort to release this information. That's my view. I may be reading the tea leaves a little bit, but I'm very confident that that's true. There's something about this information that's being released now that's important as part of this disclosure narrative. So what he talks about is something, once again, that the extraterrestrial investigators, the ufology community, has been aware of for some time. We're most familiar with the agreements that we believe were done by Dwight Eisenhower when he was president, that we've reached agreements with these extraterrestrial beings, and in particular, agreements that were done by the United States. Now, they make a big deal in the article, and people have brought out this idea that we have secret underground bases on Mars. once again, this is not going to be a surprise whatsoever. There's people who have been involved with these bases on Mars. The idea that we're operating these bases and even craft with extraterrestrial beings, once again, not going to be a surprise to anyone particularly. We're aware of this, but the fact that this is being credibly released by a credible individual is obviously very interesting. So this idea that we're going to explore Mars and we got the little rover running around and bumping into rocks and things, and people are looking at rocks and seeing if they can see the face of things, is all rather moot compared with the idea that we already have bases on Mars. That's what he's saying, and that the bases are being manned together with alien representatives. That's what he's saying. As an Israeli intelligence official, that's what he knows to be true. Now, the important thing in this, and I want to point this out, is that he mentions that the discussions going on with Israeli officials and American officials is with an entity called a Galactic Federation. I cannot emphasize to you enough in this presentation how important that is. In other words, they're dealing with an organization or entity of off-world beings, and they're going entity to entity. So Israel represents a country on Earth made up of millions of people. The United States is a country on Earth made up of millions of people. They are discussing with a group called Galactic Federation. He doesn't give us a lot of clarity on that, but that's who he's dealing with. So let's just pause and think about that just for a moment, that what's now being revealed to you is that there is an organization of off-world, non-human, Earth-human beings that are negotiating with our governments and having discussions with them about various things. Now, on the issue of disclosure itself, what Professor Eshed is telling us is that, yes, there is going to be the disclosure. We're going to become part of the galactic community, but in the opinion of this entity called Galactic Federation, we're not ready yet. That's what he says, that they have told us. The Galactic Federation, he says, is concerned about mass hysteria, because of where we are as Earth humans. But he also says something very interesting as well. Donald Trump is aware of them. He's our president. He was on the verge of disclosing the Galactic Federation to the world, but the Galactic Federation stopped him from doing so. And they give the reasons for what it is. He's very specific as to where our shortcomings are, and that is that we need to evolve and reach a stage where we will understand what space and spaceships are. So the implication of this statement is that until and unless we as a human race get to the point where this understanding is well understood, they feel that they're not ready to disclose their presence to us. And this is what he's reporting. Okay, so now let's summarize what I consider to be the material things in this disclosure, which are milestones of a sort. Donald Trump is engaging in discussions with non-Earth humans, but it's not a particular race. Many people have talked about a so-called alien invasion, or we're talking to grays, or we're talking to reptilians, or we're talking to whoever. It is not a race that they're talking to. It's a federation of many races. That is extremely important. But he's engaged in those discussions on behalf of the United States. The other thing that's important, as you can see from this, is he responds to their directives. Now, does that mean that the Federation is deciding what the United States does? I'm not saying that. What I am telling you, the important thing about this is that they're negotiating with each other as representatives of a particular entity, and they agreed. He wanted to reveal their presence. They agreed mutually, however they came to that agreement, that they were not going to do that. Okay, and the last thing is that these non-Earth humans have an organization called Galactic Federation. It's extremely important to realize what that means is that it's not a particular alien race. It's not a particular off-world group of intelligent beings that these discussions with Israel and United States are having. It's an organization called Galactic Federation. Exopolitics.org is a very, Michael Salla is a very up-to-date and credible source, and they, of course, have picked up on this story as well. And the thing that they add to this, and if you want to go to their site at exopolitics.org, I recommend that you might consider doing that. And he talks about the idea that he believes that this is linked to the new wing of the military called the U.S. Space Force, and the Space Force is part of this whole process of speeding up our humanity's technology base. Now, I'm going to go through the stuff that we've already covered in previous presentations that were done, and I'm not a prophet, but if you look at what we've presented already, everything that we've covered already fits in exactly with what Dr. Eshed is talking about. The Galactic Federation is either directly or indirectly related to the so-called Confederation of Planets, which is listed in the book called The Law of One, which was channeled in the early 1980s that we talked about in our September 6th presentation called Notice of Yahweh's Terrestrial Intentions. There is a council which is affiliated with the Confederation of Planets called the Council of Nine. We understand that they have governance over the affairs on Earth. And this is a shot from a YouTube video that was presented at that time from a Spanish channel of all of these Galactic Federation craft that were coming into Earth orbit from deeper space, and they started to orbit around us. This is the Galactic Federation, and so this fits in perfectly with the description that we had. We also talked about in Disclosure in Progress in September 28th that the understanding we need to have was first given to us by Dewey Larson. It was related to us by Professor Ronald Satz as one example, is that our universe is part of a system where time is the predominant dimensionality on one side in blue. Our reality is spatial, where time is part of it, which is in red here. And the idea is that these two are related to each other, and that's how space and time fit together. So the thing that we experience is called velocity, and that's how we move. This is what's called space-time in the Law of One. On the flip side is the inverse called time-space. This is the thing that we don't experience directly, but we do experience it through things that we would call frequency. But of course, in both cases, we experience space and time in an inverse proportion and relationship. On October the 4th, we talked about the manufacture of these anti-gravitic craft, and the reason this is important is that the U.S. Navy, as part of the U.S. military, through Salvatore Cesar Pais, has put all these patents out there in order for us to create faster than light spacecraft. So the implication is that we already have these vehicles. We can already go faster than the speed of light. We can already do all the things that many of these extraterrestrial spacecraft can do. And of course, this gets along with the idea that we share a base with them in Mars, and clearly we share their technology, and we already have these capabilities. So this frames what the Galactic Federation is saying, and that is not that we don't have this technology or ability. We do. It's in the US Patent Office. We've already talked about this. The issue is that it's not that we don't have this ability. The problem is that its understanding is being suppressed through things like our news agencies and our various censorships that are going on. And this information is now becoming commonplace, and therefore, according to them, we're caught in this paradox where on one hand they're saying humanity can't join the Earth humans can't join the Galactic Federation. They can't reveal themselves. They can't talk openly until we get to that level. But we have Earth entities that are preventing this from occurring, and we're caught in this loop as a result of this. We also recall David Wilcock telling us that he and his group are making these anti-gravity craft, and he says when you shield gravity, you shield time, and you have a time machine. So when the flow of time is interrupted with some particular technology, which is what these Paet's inventions talk about, you create what's called a time bubble, which is the thing that allows time to be frozen or suspended. They call it they call it a time bubble, and this changes the passage of time in the bubble from the passage of time outside of the bubble. So this is the kind of scientific and technological information the Galactic Federation mentioned by Dr. Eshed that's missing in order for us to join the galactic community. So this disclosure activity is important in order for us to be able to move forward according to the information that we're getting from these individuals. Okay, so that's the important presentation information I wanted to update you with. It's another milestone. It's an important milestone. There's obviously a lot more going on in the world at the moment to do with governments and all sorts of things. But this is obviously an important milestone on disclosure. Now what I would like to do is to segue into a trilogy of books that relate the biblical story of the God of the Bible called Yahweh to all of these different entities, one of which is the Confederation, which of course is, as we've already said, is the Galactic Federation. There is, in the Galactic Renewal, which is the second in this trilogy, it has a poem which talks about in the future that these non-Earth humans will join humans and will form a new confederation, which will be shared with us, and we will all be members together with them. And this is the poetry that goes along with it. Now, rather than us going through this particular poetry as it is, I want to show you a particular feature which is hidden in Jürgen Burgess's books. The Galactic Renewals, the middle one, the first one is called The Collections, and the last one's called The Ways of the King. And that is that the information is written in the same style as the Hebrew texts, which is called biblical parallelism or chiastic parallelism. So in the text, there are 13 lines, And these 13 lines are designed to be read in a chiastic format. So the theme of the poem is called "For They Are All My People." That's referring to the extraterrestrial beings and also to the humans. So let's read it, first of all, in the normal way that we would read it, and then we'll read it in the chiastic manner. It says, "Assemble the new confederation of the new ways for a cosmos remade in the image and like the likeness of my Elohim. This is the new calling. I call to all peoples, for they are all my people, and none are rejected from the least to the greatest. They are all filled with purpose and passion. It is a confederation of perfection, and this is its name." Now you'll notice that in this you've got A and A primed, you've got B and B primed, and I've got them color coded. They're also designed to be reflections of each other, and you're supposed to read it this way: "Assemble the new confederation. This is its name. Of the new ways, it's a confederation of perfection. For a cosmos remade and passion, in the image and like the likeness of my Elohim, they are all filled with purpose. This is the new calling from the least to the greatest, and I call to all peoples, and none are rejected, for they are all my people." So this is very rich textual information, and I wanted to be able to present that to you. So if you wish to get these books by Jürgen Burgess, and you want to get a deeper understanding of the messages that are in there, like the Hebrew text, that has this chiastic structure to it. The last thing we want to do is read you, and we'll end with this, and then we'll take questions afterwards, is from the third in the trilogy by Jürgen Burgess, called The Ways of the King. And I'm just going to go ahead and read this for you. And the title of this poem is called "When Elohim Ruled the Earth." And the implication is this Galactic Federation has been here for a very long time, and they were the gods that were here at that time in the ancient history of the earth. And of course, this is the implication of shows like Ancient Aliens. "When the Elohim ruled the earth, Yahweh spoke to them as children, and they admired him, and they saw him as a wise counselor. And he taught their children as his own children, and guided their footsteps in the ways of Yahweh. But they turned from him when he spoke to them the truth, for their hearts were not with him. And they sought other gods of greater creations, and there they found the Elohim of the Galactic Federations. They spoke of treaties and agreements. They spoke of places that had been governed in other ways, and they spoke with an authority that Yahweh did not. For Yahweh does not seek the obedience of those that are fearful, but the love of those who love him as a father. And so, wayward sons, you became an Elohim of cruel masters, who ruled with fear and motivated with anger and despair, who leveraged scarcity and tricked with policies of limits. And all was well during the lifetimes of these kings, until Yahweh saw the despair of your peoples, and laws changed, and times changed, and the Elohim as kings of the earth were no more. Seek Yahweh, O king." And so I leave you with this final message. This Galactic Federation that is coming to talk to us, has this not occurred before?